I am Jacob Orloy, Senior Systems Architect at Aurora Tech Software. Over 6 years, I designed and deployed our global microservices infrastructure, cut release cycles from days to minutes, and led a team of 12 engineers with steady precision. My expertise spans container management, real-time telemetry, and resilience engineering. In server rooms and war rooms, I earned a reputation for calm focus and inventive solutions. Until last quarter, everything felt aligned. The team delivered critical patches. We closed 5 enterprise contracts, and I was invited to speak at the annual summit. Then, murmurs crept into executive corridors. A memo from the new Chief Information Officer praised an AI operations platform capable of monitoring and remediating faults without human oversight. The tone felt cold, as if our skills were an inconvenient relic. That evening, I stayed late to diagnose a latency spike in our European cluster. As I traced distributed logs, I sensed unease beneath routine metrics. When human resources summoned me the next morning, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. My heart thundered, but my mind remained alert. I believed in fairness and respect. This moment would ripple far beyond my keycard in my Berlin apartment. Something had begun. The layoff notice arrived as I was stabilizing our Asia-Pacific cluster. A terse email from Human Resources informed me that Aurora Tech was terminating my employment, effective immediately, and that I would receive a standard severance package under the terms of my signed employment agreement. My access tokens revoked, my keycard deactivated, I watched blinking monitors that I no longer controlled. The quiet panic of losing a livelihood I'd built through sleepless nights and code reviews pressed into my chest like a physical weight. I left the office with only my laptop bag and weeks' worth of project notes. The next morning, a public announcement detailed the launch of Aurora AI Ops, the very automated fault remediation platform I'd architected over 18 months. The slide deck, presented by the new CIO, included my resilience algorithm, complete with the same Kubernetes pod scaling logic and adaptive rollback routines I'd patented. A small logo in the corner credited an outside Palo Alto consultancy I'd never met. They'd stolen my designs and buried my name. Anger and disbelief collided in my mind. How could the company that had championed my work turn so quickly to betrayal? I spent the afternoon replaying every client call, every architectural review, searching for a misstep or warning that I'd missed. Sleep fled me that night. My hands shook as I drafted a message to our legal department, but I deleted it before sending. Fear of non-compete clauses and a drafted non-disclosure agreement kept me silent. The next day, I returned to headquarters as a visitor. I approached the HR office, presentation in hand, and asked why my intellectual property was being credited to others. They closed the door on me. In the cafeteria, I overheard a senior manager joke about human inefficiency. My own team, 12 engineers I mentored, had departed under similar notices. Each whiteboard sketch I'd drafted, each line of code I'd reviewed, now belonged to a system that treated their contributions as expendable. That evening, I discovered the smoking gun in my archived Git commit history. A private branch I'd secured behind multi-factor authentication had been cloned by someone with a compromised service account. Email headers revealed the breach originated from Mark Layton, my former protege, forwarding the repository link to the CIO's personal inbox. He'd crossed a line from admiration to outright theft. The realization cut deeper than the layoff itself. This was personal. Sitting in my dimly lit apartment, I gathered printed exhibits, time-stamped log exports, NDA clauses, severance agreement screenshots, and laid them on the dining table. My heart pounded as I considered the consequences for Mark and the executive team. I felt betrayal and grief wash over me, but beneath the turmoil, a steel determination took shape. I would not let this injustice stand. My first response would be measured, but my resolve was absolute. The battle lines were drawn, and I knew that calm, strategic action would be my guide through the storm of corporate deceit. Dawn broke over Riga as I reviewed the exhibits strewn across the dining table. Every printed email, header, commit log, and severance clause now felt like a roadmap of betrayal. I traced the flow of intellectual property from my local repository into Aurora AI Ops containers. My designs now ran in thousands of instances without attribution. The weight of realization pressed harder than any layoff notice. I identified my resilience algorithm buried in the public release notes, complete with my original variable names. A slide deck described autoscaling policies that mirrored my patented formulas. I spun up a disposable Kubernetes cluster for a throughput simulation and watched performance metrics crater under peak load. That experiment confirmed my suspicion that the stolen code lacked proper stress testing. The injustice now threatened client systems and reputations. That morning I scheduled a call with an intellectual property attorney at Davis & Morgan. She explained that my source code qualified for trade secret protection under European law and that my patent provided grounds for infringement claims. We discussed drafting a cease and desist letter alongside a motion for preliminary injunction. She also proposed a parallel consulting proposal to mitigate damages and strengthen my leverage. I felt the first spark of strategic clarity. I organized my digital evidence into a structured chronology, labeling each directory and log archive. Using Splunk queries and Python scripts, I assembled a forensic timeline of the breach date, user session details, and unauthorized code additions. Each artifact would serve as an exhibit in any legal filing. I saved final reports as formatted digital portfolios with cryptographic hashes for chain of custody. The exercise transformed chaos into actionable data. Next, I mapped the corporate hierarchy to identify decision-makers beyond the chief information officer. I noted the chief executive officer who had championed the artificial intelligence rollout, and the chief financial officer who signed off on the vendor agreement. I also pinpointed board members with technical backgrounds. Understanding the political landscape would prove vital for my strategy. With each name and title, I added a reference to my briefing document. I reached out to a former colleague who still held a senior engineer position at AuroraTech. He confirmed whispers of major outages in the Asia-Pacific region and reported that incident tickets had spiked by 70%. These failures translated directly into client complaints and potential contract penalties. His insider details underscored the urgency of my plan. The moment to act had arrived. Recognizing an opening, I decided to offer my skills as an independent consultant. I drafted a service proposal outlining a 48-hour rapid response sprint to restore full functionality. I attached comprehensive deliverables including a system audit, resilience code patches, and upgraded monitoring protocols. I set a rate of €5,000 per day to reflect both my expertise and the risk involved. Presenting a credible alternative would strengthen my legal and business position. Simultaneously, I prepared a demand letter detailing my rights under the non-disclosure agreement I had signed and my pending patent claims. I stated my intent to seek injunctive relief and damages if the unauthorized use did not cease within 10 business days. The letter offered a dual pathway: technical remediation through my consultancy or legal escalation. Framing it as a choice shifted control back into my hands. I drafted each sentence to balance firmness and professionalism. To broaden my support, I reached out discreetly to the 12 engineers who had worked under my direction. I proposed forming a small network of specialist consultants, each focusing on modules they originally authored. We agreed on profit share percentages and defined clear roles in an operating agreement. The combination of our collective expertise and the comprehensive evidence portfolio created formidable leverage. I felt a stirring of solidarity and shared determination. I assembled a board deck blending legal exhibits with performance graphs and code comparisons. Slide 1 presented the incident timeline. Slide 2 displayed memory usage curves and error rates before and after the unauthorized deployment. Slide 3 outlined my remediation plan with milestones, quality gates, and key performance indicators. Slide 4 summarized legal ramifications and consulting benefits. The presentation conveyed both urgency and opportunity. Over the next 2 days, I refined each detail, rehearsing my speaking points in front of a mirror. I timed transitions to ensure clarity and impact. I double-checked exhibits for proper annotation and cryptographic verification. I composed 2 email templates, one for initial outreach to the board and another for the executive team. By the end of the second day, my strategy felt airtight. In parallel, I formalized my consulting venture, registering a limited liability company with the Riga municipal authorities. I drafted standard contracts with defined statements of work, deliverables, and termination clauses. I arranged escrow accounts for client funds with release conditions tied to agreed service levels. Establishing a professional structure would showcase credibility and separate my business activities from personal assets. Each legal document became another pillar in my defensive fortress. As dusk fell, I reviewed the plan one final time, aware that balance was critical. I could pursue full legal action or steer the board toward my consulting solution. The dual approach provided maximum leverage. I felt confidence building within me as if my anger had been channeled into strategic precision. Tomorrow would be the moment of truth. I cleared the dining table, leaving only a clean laptop and my briefing folder neatly stacked. The glow of the screen reflected a composed determination on my face. The injustice I had endured became fuel rather than burden. I closed my eyes and visualized the Aurora Tech boardroom, the pivot point where my plan would either triumph or demand further action. Ready for whatever came next, I embraced my role as architect of both code and destiny. I sent the demand letter and consulting proposal by secure email to the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and 3 board members. The subject line read, "Immediate action required. Aurora AI Ops Remediation Proposal." Attached was the 4-slide deck with cryptographic hashes and a signed retainer agreement. Within 2 hours, the Chief Financial Officer replied, requesting a call to discuss terms. My attorney advised me to keep negotiations documented, so I recorded the session on a corporate-approved platform. On the call, the CFO tried to downplay the outages, citing internal transition pains. He proposed hiring their in-house consulting firm at half my rate. I reminded him that the existing code lacked proper stress validation and that license infringement exposed them to severe penalties. He hesitated as I outlined potential damages under the Trade Secrets Directive and my pending patent suit. By the end of the hour, the CFO agreed to my full rate of €10,000 per day and released initial funding into escrow. That afternoon, I joined a secure video conference with the Chief Technology Officer and the Head of Global Operations. I shared my screen to walk through the 3rd slide showing memory leak patterns in the Asia-Pacific cluster. Their jaws tightened as they saw error rates spiking to 700 incidents per hour and service-level agreements in breach. I explained how the stolen code introduced untested dependency loops. The CTO acknowledged they lacked the context to debug at scale. He greenlit my proposed 48-hour rapid response sprint. Within minutes, I spun up a reserve staging environment in our private cloud and imported the compromised microservices repository. I ran static analysis using SonarQube and my custom resilience linter, identifying 24 critical code paths with buffer overflows and missing circuit breakers. I refactored the adaptive rollback routine and restored original Kubernetes pod auto-scaling thresholds. Each commit was cryptographically signed and immediately deployed behind a blue-green gateway to avoid downtime. Automated health checks began reporting restored stability metrics in real time. By midnight, I opened a private Slack channel named Aurora Recovery and invited the 12 former colleagues who had agreed to join my venture. Each engineer tackled a module they originally authored. One rewrote the telemetry ingestion pipeline to eliminate duplicated event traces. Another optimized the database connection pool to reduce lock contention. We worked with military precision, using a shared runbook and rotating 20-minute pair programming sessions. Every update passed through my quality assurance script and was tagged for audit. At 3 a.m, the Asia-Pacific production cluster triggered a high-severity alert. Without hesitation, I initiated the emergency rollout of our patched containers. Notifications streamed in. Error rates dropped from 700 to 30 incidents per hour, and service availability climbed back to 99.8%. I sent a brief status report to the board. The Chief Financial Officer replied with a concise approval to extend our engagement by a further 5 days. The next morning, I prepared the executive summary slide deck, comparing baseline metrics and post-remediation performance. CPU utilization decreased by 45%. Incident tickets fell 80%. I presented these results in a live board meeting via encrypted connection. Heads around the virtual table nodded as the Chief Executive Officer voiced relief and gratitude. He asked me to draft a long-term resilience plan as a follow-up engagement. Meanwhile, my attorney filed for a preliminary injunction to halt further use of Aurora AI Ops. Within 24 business hours, the court granted an ex parte order compelling Aurora Tech to suspend deployments containing my designs. The company board discreetly opened licensing negotiations with my newly formed LLC. Emails circulated praising both the legal team's decisiveness and our technical achievements. By the end of the first 5-day sprint, we had fully reclaimed control of the global cluster. Clients who had threatened contract penalties acknowledged our performance improvements in writing. The escrow account released the first tranche of funds. I closed the call feeling the same calm focus that had guided me through every challenge. What began as a fight for justice had become a demonstration of our collective expertise. My strategy had succeeded without aggression, relying on meticulous planning, irrefutable evidence, and collaborative execution. Early on the 9th day, A terse alert lit up my phone. The European cluster had fallen into cascading failures, exactly the scenario we'd predicted would expose Aurora AI Ops' flawed code under concurrent load. The chief executive officer convened an emergency virtual meeting with the full board, the CIO, the CFO, and legal counsel. I joined from my home office, the same room where I'd once splayed evidence across my dining table. My heart thumped, but my voice stayed calm. This was the moment the board had to choose between continued costly delays or acknowledging the truth I'd laid out in every slide deck and demand letter. I began by sharing real-time graphs of failed health checks, memory spikes, and rollback loops frozen in error state. Behind me, my former colleagues monitored live logs, ready to demonstrate our patched microservices running parallel sequences without a single fault. As I toggled between screens, I presented the Git commit history comparing timestamps, our clean, cryptographically signed commits, versus the unauthorized versions that had caused the meltdown. The CTO's face fell as he realized his team's inability to trace the error without full context of our original resilience routines. At that moment, the board members leaned in, eyes narrowing with a mix of incredulity and anger. I paused, letting the silence underscore the gap between presented assurances of the AI platform's infallibility and the stark reality of its collapse. Then I pressed, quote, share on the breach log, showing Mark Layton's compromised service account, forwarding my private repository link directly to the CIO's inbox. The audio crackled as the board absorbed the magnitude of Mark's betrayal and the executive endorsement of ill-gotten code. My voice softened as I reminded them of the 10-day deadline in my cease and desist letter and the looming preliminary injunction already granted by the Riga Commercial Court. You can choose to litigate and risk public disclosure of every board meeting, every email I've shared under privilege, or you can resolve this privately, I said. The choice is yours. The CFO swallowed hard and exchanged a glance with the CEO. The CIO, pale and deflated, stammered an apology, though it rang hollow. I steered the conversation toward a concise settlement. A lump sum payment of €1.2 million in damages, a 3-year licensing agreement for my patented resilience algorithms at a royalty rate of 5% per deployment instance, and a guaranteed multi-phase consulting contract to oversee the full refactor of Aurora AI Ops. We also stipulated the immediate termination of Mark Layton's consulting contract and a public acknowledgement of my contributions in the upcoming product roadmap. The legal counsel nodded, recognizing the strength of my case. The CEO cleared his throat and asked the CFO if those terms were acceptable. Silence stretched before the CFO exhaled and said yes. I felt a rush of relief, followed by a profound sense of vindication. Over the following 2 hours, we negotiated the finer points: payment schedules, non-disparagement clauses, confidentiality obligations, and a clear path for knowledge transfer. The board agreed to a final technical review by my team at no extra cost if performance metrics dipped below agreed SLAs. Every bullet point I scribbled in my notepad represented hard-won leverage, the product of sleepless calculations, legal memoranda, and countless lines of code detached from the theft. When the meeting adjourned, the CEO offered a hesitant smile. "Jacob, I'm sorry it took this long," he said. "Your work saved our clients and our reputation." I nodded, choosing not to dwell on the apology I'd never received when I was first laid off. Instead, I thanked them for their willingness to do the right thing. As I closed my laptop, I recognized Mark Layton's name flash in the meeting minutes one last time, acronymed under "Terminated for Cause," a fitting epilogue. Later that afternoon, I signed the final settlement documents with my attorney present. The pen felt heavier than any keyboard keystroke, laden with every late night and every moment of doubt I'd overcome. My LLC's escrow account received the first installment. My consulting calendar filled with kickoff calls for the long-term resilience engagement. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I closed my laptop and walked outside into the Riga sunshine, breathing deeply. I thought of my former teammates, now collaborators in our lean consultancy, sharing in the victory. I thought of every line of code I'd written, and nearly lost to unacknowledged theft. Most of all, I felt a glow of quiet pride. Justice had not come from aggression, but from meticulous preparation and unwavering integrity. The board had underestimated me, mistaking a layoff victim for a powerless employee. They discovered their mistake too late, but for me, it was vindication that competence, honesty, and strategic resolve cannot be sidelined. As I step outside into the Riga sunlight, I carry the weight of every line of code I nearly lost to corporate theft and deceit. The triumph feels more profound than a routine deployment because it restored my professional dignity and my team's faith in our craft. I learned that strategic calm can outmatch raw anger when every move is guided by precise evidence and unwavering focus. My journey through betrayal and legal wrangling became a testament to enduring resilience and the power of meticulous planning. I look back on nights spent assembling digital evidence into clear exhibits, rehearsing every slide transition, and sequencing each cryptographic hash to prove authorship. I realized that respect and mutual trust are the foundations of any successful collaboration, technical or otherwise. When those values erode, even the most sophisticated AI platform can collapse under its own mechanical assumptions and hidden flaws. My former colleagues and I rebuilt not only critical infrastructure, but also our collective confidence through shared purpose and transparent communication. The moral became clear. A powerful organization that undervalues individual contributions will inevitably sow the seeds of its own undoing. Greed and unchecked ego blinded the board to the depth of expertise I had honed over years of architecting resilient systems. Integrity cannot be replaced by an algorithm, no matter how sophisticated, because human judgment and ethical standards remain the ultimate guardrails. True justice arises when undeniable competence meets unwavering conviction in pursuit of what is right. I celebrate the dignity we reclaimed with every refactored module, every log reprocessed, and every incident ticket we reduced to near zero. My consultancy venture grew from a dining table plan into a lifeline for clients in crisis, demonstrating that expertise combined with integrity delivers lasting value. Strategic, thoughtful action proved mightier than any hasty retaliation or public spectacle, because it solved the root problems while preserving mutual respect. Our victory reaffirmed that meticulous preparation and professional integrity always pay dividends in the long run. Moving forward, I carry these lessons into every future engagement, every critical incident response, and every line of code I write with deliberate care. I invite fellow professionals to remember that human insight, collaboration, and respect are irreplaceable assets in any technological endeavor. By valuing each person's unique expertise and honoring their contributions, organizations can forge stronger, more resilient systems that serve clients and communities alike. In the end, it was honor and strategic resolve that built my path to redemption, and these principles will continue to guide me as I chart the course ahead.